Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Desi from Clean Air Partnership. We are a registered charity that serves as the Secretariat for the Clean Air Council, and Clean Air Council is the largest peer-to-peer municipal climate action network representing over 39 municipalities in Ontario. We are a Toronto-based organization, and we want to acknowledge that the stolen land on which we operate is the traditional territory of Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. At CAP, we recognize that many Indigenous peoples are particularly vulnerable to climate change and will be disproportionately impacted by its effects. Through our work, we are committed to disrupting ongoing approaches to climate governance that reproduce settler-colonial relations and systematically exclude Indigenous peoples from policymaking. I wanted to share a short video with you so we can learn hopefully something new for Indigenous people and from Indigenous people.
There's a few things you should know about Indigenous peoples and what we know today as Canada before you keep scrolling. Most importantly, we still exist. In fact, we're one of the fastest growing populations here in Canada, and we're here to stay. We exist and take up all spaces. We're not just found on TV or reservations. Residential schools and boarding schools were real and continue to affect us today. The 60s scoop was real. Sterilization is real. MMIW is real. Suicide and incarceration is real. And we pay taxes. Non-status Indigenous peoples are Indigenous peoples too. Disconnected, reconnecting, and enfranchised Indigenous peoples are still Indigenous. Indigenous peoples are not to be romanticized. We wear regalia and outfits, but not costumes. Our women are sacred, and misogyny, sexism, and homophobia have no place in our cultures. And finally, we're friggin' deadly, and don't touch our hair.
Moving on with one of our resources, the Municipal Climate Decision Calendar provides a central platform to share information about upcoming council and committee meetings from across municipalities in Ontario. And I will share a link in the chat shortly so you can access it. Lastly, our upcoming events, there is one just in a few hours if you're interested in EV fleets. And All About Green Roofs is on April 26th at 1 p.m. And I'll share a link with our events page as well. But now I want to introduce our guest speakers. Aisha, Lily, Shireen, Amy, and Kevin are the master students studying in the Master of Environment and Sustainability program at Western University. And they did the research on best practices and developed the database tool that they will share with you at the end of their presentation. Thank you, Team Western, for being here. Right after their presentation, we have Amanda. She has been with Reef Consulting since 2019 and has worked with multiple public sectors clients to jumpstart their sustainable procurement programs through policy and tool development, acting planning, and training. Currently, she is the manager for the Canadian Collaboration for Sustainable Procurement, which is a program managed by Reef, where she runs webinars, working groups, and a resource library to support a network of 45 public sector organizations, all advancing sustainable procurement. Thank you, Amanda, for being with us here. And now I will invite Aisha to share your screen, and you can take it away, Team Western. And while she's doing this, I will encourage everyone to write your questions in the Q&A box. After both presentations, we'll have time for Q&A where we can address your questions. Thank you. Take it away.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Desi. Good morning, everyone. So thank you for joining us this morning. As Desi mentioned, we are master's students from Western University. And for the past semester, we have been working with Desi and CAP on this research project to get a better understanding of green procurement policies across Canada and even some select cities in the US. And so we're really excited to share our findings with you today. Before we get into it, as students from Western and London, Ontario, we also wanted to begin with a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenape and Chonatongton peoples on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. We acknowledge that this is sacred land upon which we are privileged to live and work. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples, whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to our society. We'll now get right into it. I'll pass it on to Kevin to start us off.
Okay, so thank you, Aisha. Okay, so thank you so much. So I want to start talking about what is green procurement. And so green procurement is the purchasing of goods and services that minimize environmental impact, and it also considers the social and ethical impacts as well in addition to environmental impact. And in past days, a lot of municipalities and a lot of business and a lot of organizations focus on the financial aspect when choosing procurements, but then these days there's a transition to shift for considering the environmental impact. And in municipality settings, this spans a wide range of goods and services, including construction materials, fleets, buildings, and food and supplies. And I'll toss to Amy to talk more about it.
Thanks, Kevin. So knowing a little bit more about what green procurement is, we can now ask ourselves why green procurement might be important. So the first reason is that it helps to advance municipal sustainability goals and to enhance climate commitments. Acting on green procurement allows municipalities to take internal action on their sustainability goals. And procurement is an often overlooked area where really impactful sustainable decisions can be made. Green procurement also allows for true best value purchasing. Oftentimes, many more sustainable options can be financially viable in the long term, which is very exciting and makes these options a little bit more appealing. And lastly, green procurement can help signal changing priorities to the market. So this can stimulate growth within our vendor community if we see that buyers are wanting change, and in turn lead to creating a wider pool of sustainable options to choose from. So before we get into some of our findings, as well as some illustrative case studies that we found throughout our research, I'm going to pass it to my colleague Shireen to give a bit of background on our project.
Thanks, Amy. So our project has three major objectives. First, we aim to highlight the best practice in green procurement and identify common barriers in municipal operation. Secondly, we want to demystify green procurement, increase transparency, and demonstrate success story for knowledge sharing, like today. By sharing success stories, we hope to inspire others to adopt green procurement practices. Lastly, our team has created a centralized and accessible information resource for municipal procurement staff. This database contains information from different green procurement practices adopted by municipalities in Canada and the US. We believe that this database will be a valuable resource for procurement staff as it will provide them with insights and information to implement different green procurement practices. And we will introduce the database at the end of our presentation. About the methodology, this research was conducted to identify best practice for green procurement from municipalities in both Canada and the US. Our team focuses on daily operation procurement, such as office supply or cleaning supply, but we excluded municipal fleets, buildings, and transportation practices. The project was conducted in two phases. The first phase is the review of municipal policy and documents. Our team reviewed the CAP 2012 scan and examined municipal website, policies, and documentation. For phase two, we involved a survey and interview. Our team conducted 2 interviews with the person and manager and municipal procurement from Vancouver and York region. We also shared a short survey about green procurement to all CAC members via the CAP newsletter. So now that we have discussed some background in this research, let's take a look at some of the best practice in municipal green procurement that we identified through this research. The first practice is the cooperative purchasing. Cooperative purchasing involves organizations collaborating to purchase goods and services collectively. This allowed them to pool their resources, lead to cost saving, increase efficiency, better access to goods and services, and also facilitate the adaptation of environmental friendly procurement process. One example of a successful cooperative purchasing is the York Purchasing Cooperative. The cooperative provides sustainable procurement and competitive pricing for its members. They prioritize eco-friendly products and also local suppliers, which help them to reduce the carbon footprint associated with the transportation and shipping. Also, the cooperative provides knowledge sharing opportunity to its members, which improve their understanding of sustainable procurement practices and facilitate the adoption of those environmental friendly practices. This creates a win-win situation for both the environment and the organizations involved. The second practice we'd like to share is the environmental criteria and living consideration, which means formally stating and evaluating the environmental impact of products and service being procured. Environmental criteria can be integrated into the procurement process from the bid document development to the supplier bid proposal evaluation. For example, specific weighting can be given to sustainability criteria favoring supplier with sustainable practices. In doing so, we're not only reducing our environmental impact, but we're also supporting business that prioritize sustainability. A great case study that highlights the importance of environmental criteria is the town of Aurora. They have taken steps to consider climate change impact by including green procurement evaluation criteria and specification in project bid document. These evaluation criteria and specification are transparent, rationally connected to the procurement project, and included a pass-fail and scoring requirement, which make it easier for supplier to understand what is expected from them and also for the municipality to evaluate bid based on the environmental criteria. Now I would like to pass it down to Kevin.
Okay, so back to me. So I want to focus talking about green supplies, and I believe, assuming that a lot of people already know about the green supplies, but then I want to focus about two different categories. One is office supplies, and then the other one is green cleaning and hygiene supplies. So as I mentioned in previous slides, that I talk about that a lot of municipality and businesses focus on financial costs when choosing office supplies, but then nowadays they focus on sustainable, they focus on the sustainable considerations such as considering environmental impact, minimizing waste and greenhouse gas emissions, and prioritizing energy efficient products and products that use recycled materials.
Oh, Kevin, are you there? I believe we lost him. Can someone else jump?
Yeah, I can jump in, Desi, for this one. So I think Kevin was just talking about green cleaning supplies.
When they're choosing office supplies, such as using devices, something like that. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Kevin, we lost you and then you joined back in. Did you want to pick up where you left off?
Okay, sorry. My internet is somehow really bad in London area right now, so I don't know why, but then let me just pick it up. Sorry about it. So yeah, so I don't know where I'm lost, but I'll just start from the minimizing waste and greenhouse gas emissions and prioritizing energy efficient products that use recycled materials and extra. And then there's also a green cleaning and hygiene product that I want to focus on. And not a lot of people, not a lot of business know about this products, but it is a non-toxic and natural ingredients products, and it is more sustainable and like option than the traditional method. But there's a misconception about the effectiveness that it is not that effective as the traditional chemical hygiene products, but that is not true. And then there's more efficient research paper that talking about it is more effective than the traditional chemical one. Also it is also environmentally friendly products, such as using hand dryer rather than using a paper towel, something like that would be a example of the green cleanings and hygiene products.
And about reporting and tracking green procurement progress, ongoing monitoring of green procurement process is crucial to ensure that municipalities are making a positive impact on the environment and society. This involves counting green purchases, quantifying emission reduction, and reviewing the procurement budget allocation regularly. By tracking the progress, it helps municipalities monitor the achievement and identify areas for improvement. On the other hand, by reporting the outcome, municipalities can also update stakeholders on the result of green procurement in a transparent and clear manner. One great example of reporting and tracking green procurement progress is the city of Whitehorse. The city requires staff to submit a semi-annual report to the city council on procurement outcome that incorporates sustainability procurement and solicitation documents over 100,000. This reporting provides transparency and accountability to the public and ensure that the city is meeting its sustainability goals.
All right, so another best practice that we identified in our research that we found to be quite common, yet still very important, is the use of a life cycle analysis, or an LCA. So for those of you who may not be familiar with this term, LCA is a method used in the evaluation of a product's environmental impact that consider factors across that product's lifetime, such as raw material extraction and processing, manufacturing, usage, all the way to end-of-life disposal. Now, in green procurement specifically, the use of an LCA allows for the incorporation of true best value into a purchasing decision because it is able to comprehensively evaluate the complete economic, environmental, and social costs and benefits of a product across its life. We found that many municipalities have begun to embed holistic LCAs into their procurement policies, allowing them to really maximize the impact of their purchases in all three of those different pillars that I was previously mentioning earlier.
So the next best practice is the prioritization of local procurement, which involves just prioritizing local vendors when considering a bid or when procuring any kind of good or service. This reduces greenhouse gas emissions associated with transportation, and it's not only sustainable for the local economy, but also sustainable for the environment. The case study that we identified in this situation is the City of Montreal. They've released fairly recently a very comprehensive responsible procurement policy that considers both ESG factors as well as economic factors and how they relate to purchasing decisions. In terms of identifying a local business, they consider where the products and services are acquired, where the business is located, where the products are designed, produced, and assembled, as well as the holding of capital by people who reside in Quebec or Canada. This program provides an incentive for local entrepreneurs to transition towards a more environment, social, governance-focused, circular, and low-carbon economy.
So the next best practice that we identified in municipal procurement was the emphasis on and the use of recycled materials in products, as this can be both environmentally friendly and cost-effective. So it reduces waste going to landfills, it conserves natural resources, and it also reduces the energy required for manufacturing of brand new materials. The use of recycled materials can also have economic benefits by supporting local recycling industries, and then in turn creating jobs and stimulating economic growth in the community. So one unique example that we found was back in 2021. Again, the town of Aurora, they incorporated recycled concrete material as a provisional item in a road reconstruction project in order to encourage sustainable construction and building practices for town-owned infrastructure. And we thought this was interesting because concrete may not be the first material that comes to mind when thinking of areas where materials can be recycled, but it just goes to show the innovation and possibilities that exist within sustainable and green procurement, and specifically in recycled materials. So another one of the ways that we found municipalities can advance sustainable procurement within their units is through educating those who are directly involved in the process. And this can include parties such as buyers, contract managers, and vendors as well. Not only is education important for ensuring that necessary steps are taken throughout the procurement process to be thorough and comprehensive, but this education can also foster a greater understanding of and align individuals with each municipality's overarching sustainability goals and commitments. And we have created some distinction within this broader category to both internal education as well as external awareness. So on the internal side, this education component is more so related to training for municipal staff. This can entail different actions such as providing educational resources, hosting live or pre-recorded training sessions, and just overall kind of creating a stronger sense of collective vision for staff who are inherently working towards achieving these municipal climate goals. Now, on the other hand, external awareness focuses less on a how-to of green procurement and more so on the why. We found that some municipalities have been implementing strategies for this, such as hosting regular opportunities for collaboration with their vendors in things such as open forums, implementing various vendor scorecards, and then also maintaining public records of any green contracts that are secured. And overall, the goal of this is that if municipalities and other large buyers are actively promoting their commitment to sustainability and as well as pushing for an increasing pressure on supplier accountability, vendors will hopefully be able to encourage more sustainable operations in the long run, which will be a beneficial situation for everyone involved.
And about third-party certification, well, third-party certification is another common practice used in green procurement, as third-party certification organizations provide a reliable and independent assessment of a product and a service environmental and social impact. They use rigorous standards and criteria to evaluate the sustainability of a product and service, including its energy efficiency, material sourcing, and the production practices. By relying on a third-party certification, municipalities can be confident that the product and service that they purchase are meeting some sustainability standard. This not only reduces our environmental impact, but also promote ethical and socially responsible practice throughout the supply chain. And here are some examples of the third-party certification, such as the Energy Star, the Eco Logo, and some more socially related fair trade certification.
Okay, perfect. And just to let you guys know, just in case if my internet connection is unstable, my amazing colleague Amy is going to pick it up, but let's hope it doesn't happen. But waste reduction. Okay, so waste reduction is consideration of the amount of waste generated through both packaging and the uses of a product. And it also considers the procuring reusable recycled products and avoiding excessive packaging or single-use products. And then the town of Oakville is using this strategy in their office. So in the past years, they use K-pop pots, and it was like fully disposable plastic pots. But then now they are sending back to the recycling facility to increase the life cycle. And even further, they're now purchasing a coffee in bulk and grinding on coffee beans rather than using a K-cup pots, and encouraging municipality staff to drink out of reusable mugs. And the only waste that is generated from the office snack will be organic waste. And this is really easy practice to implement in office setting. So this is like really the best case study.
So now we're going to move into a couple unique practices that we identified. The first one comes from PEI, and it is their Energy Technology Investment Fund. This fund incentivizes the procurement of sustainable technology and infrastructure by making funds available to government departments or agencies that are responsible for operating and maintaining government facilities. They can use these funds to purchase technologies that reduce energy usage and/or increase the overall efficiency of the facility. And the fund is designed to be self-sustaining by reinvesting those energy savings back into fund new technology projects. This has long-term innovation implications because it not only encourages their government staff to be thinking about technological investments and efficient and energy efficient investments, it also could encourage other municipalities or other provinces to put together a similar fund.
The second case study we wanted to highlight was actually from the United States. So the city of Denver is an environmental leader in road de-icing. So they avoid the use of sodium chloride or salt due to its corrosive nature and negative environmental impacts. So instead, they prefer to use liquid magnesium chloride and granular de-icing compounds. They've partnered with an organization called Envirotech, which provide products such as Meltdown Apex and Ice Slicer. So Ice Slicer specifically is a homogeneous product containing natural minerals that outperforms traditional road salts, melting ice and snow to a lower temperature and requiring fewer applications. It also reduces the need for aggregates, mitigating sediment road wash into nearby ecosystems. And lastly, Meltdown Apex is a performance-enhanced magnesium chloride brine that improves results also at lower temperatures.
So just to wrap things up, we wanted to share with you the barriers and recommendations that came out of this research that we did. The first barrier that we noticed was that if there is a lack of awareness and knowledge among the staff and vendors, it's really difficult to enact green procurement policy because nobody knows quite what to do or how to do it. And in a similar sense, if there's any high staff turnover within a department, that can lead to a loss of any of the expertise that does get built up. Additionally, procurement silos can hinder a sustainability expert's ability to provide recommendations, so just any kind of communication barrier there. And as well, policy is crucial in driving green practices, but demand and education are necessary for implementing policy. So it's a bit of a back and forth there. And from these, we've identified a couple recommendations. The first one is just employee empowerment and education, which involves particularly enabling municipal staff to act on green procurement and make sustainable choices, even if there isn't an explicit policy in place that dictates they must. Then facilitating and participating in knowledge sharing and collaboration events like this one today. So it's a good start. And then finally, explicit language and ambitious targets, as with any goal, make it easier to accomplish and measure your progress when working towards something like more green procurement.
All right, thanks, Lily. So just to wrap up the presentation, we wanted to show a quick demo of the actual database that we developed. So it's just
provide a quick overview of how to use this database prepared for the Clean Air Partnership, which consists of green procurement practices in municipalities. There are 3 tabs in this database. The first one is titled Form, the second one is Database, and the third one is the Dynamic Dashboard. We'll start by looking at the Database tab. This contains the entire database of practices of the municipalities that we researched. It is organized by country, municipality, population, category of the type of practice, a description of what the practice is. There's sections for financial difficulty level, logistical difficulty level, when the practice was last updated, whether or not the municipality is a member of the CAC, and finally a link to the reference or the original source of where this information was derived from. This tab in itself is interactive. You can filter it based on what you're looking for. So for example, if you want to explore practices within a specific category, by clicking this drop down, you can select which category you would like to explore. So for example, if you're interested in looking at life cycle analysis related practices, you can check that box, and then all of the practices within the databases have been filtered out for that category. Similarly, if you wanted to look at a specific municipality, you could kind of do the same thing, click the drop down, select a municipality, and everything related to that category of municipality have been filtered through. To get rid of any of the filters, just click on the drop down again, and you can select all, and this brings the database back to its original state. Now, in the event that you would like to add a new practice to add to the database, that's the purpose of this Form tab. So how it works is most of these fields are drop-down menus. So we'll go through a test one to demonstrate how it works. For example, if you would like to add a practice from a municipality within Canada, we would start by clicking the drop down there and selecting the appropriate country, the municipality, what the category of the practice is. So say we would want to add one related to waste reduction, we can find it there. The year that it was updated, let's say that it was just updated this year. Fill in the population of the city. So for example, you just type in the population there. Financial difficulty level, this is a range between low, medium, and high. For the sake of example, we can select these options. Select whether or not the municipality is a CAC member. Type in a description of what the practice is, and any other relevant information would go here. And then finally, you would enter a link to the source where you could find more information related to the practice. Once all the fields have been filled in, you can click Submit to Database. You'll notice that all of the fields have gone empty, and that's an indication that the practice was successfully submitted to the database. To confirm that, we can go to this Database tab, and if you scroll all the way to the bottom, all the new entries get added at the end. And as you can see, our test practice has been populated. You'll also notice that the categories auto change colors based on the category. Finally, this Dynamic Dashboard tab is a quick way to show important KPIs related to what's in the database. Right now, we have these 2 pie charts. The one on the right is showing the categories of the different practices and what percentage of the practices are populated within the database. Similarly, this one on the left is showing CIC members and how many practices are made up in the database by those specific municipalities. And then finally, this one at the bottom here lists all the categories and how many practices according to that category are in the database. This is dynamic, which means that whenever you add a new entry into the database through the form, this will update automatically to reflect any changes. And that concludes this tutorial.
All right, and that is our presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, team from Western, and not just for the presentation, but for the great work that you did through the last months. I shared the link with everyone in the chat, how you can access the database. We are in the beta version right now, so it's downloadable, but very soon in the next week, it's going to be on the cloud, so you will be able to provide your updates, and we'll be tracking that as well. I see that questions are coming. We'll keep them for in the Q&A section, but now I will invite Amanda to share your screen and hear updates from CCSP.
Great, thanks, Desi. Wonderful. All right, so yeah, very happy to be here today and speaking to you all about sustainable procurement. As you know, my name is Amanda. I'm the program manager for the Canadian Collaboration for Sustainable Procurement, or because that's a bit of a mouthful, the CCSP. I'm joining from the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, which includes the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations, or what is commonly known as Vancouver, BC. Today, I'll go through just really quickly a little bit about the CCSP program, because that is where I'll be sourcing kind of my information for this presentation. We'll go through some of the trends in sustainable procurement and public sector success stories, all sourced from our 2022 annual report and sourced from the members themselves of the CCSP. So the CCSP, we are a community of practice focused on sustainable procurement. All of our members are in the public sector, and we really are here to facilitate knowledge sharing and learning among those members. And so here's a sense of who is in our membership. We're at about 45 organizations currently, all facets of the public sector. So, you know, municipalities, provincial and federal bodies, crown corporations, as well as universities and colleges. So, you know, lots of span there, coast to coast to coast as well. And so as part of the program, members pay an annual fee, and what they get in return is a series of webinars or peer exchanges, as we like to call them. We always do a working group, which creates some sort of tool or resource at the end of the year that they share with the rest of the members. We do some program benchmarking and assessments with them to help them, you know, plan what activities they'd like to do throughout the year. And we also have a really comprehensive online resource library with lots of sample tools and reports and resources that they can use to help them in their implementation. And we also have an annual report, which I'll talk a little bit about. And so that's right here on the next slide, actually. So the 2022 annual report is published now. It's available on our website, briefconsulting.com/about-CCSP. I've actually got a chat or a link I can pop into the chat there. So you can download the report from that website. And what this is, we do this every year. It contains kind of our best practice framework and recommendations. It includes top 10 trends in sustainable procurement that we observe throughout the year. It also has success stories from the 45 members, as well as dives into some of their main program developments and achievements throughout the year. So lots of really great stuff to dig into in this report. And what I'll be doing during this presentation is pulling out some highlights from the 2022 annual report. And if you ever want to access older reports, feel free to just reach out to me and I can share those, as only the current one is available on our website. Okay, so Yeah, the students from Western did a really good job of defining sustainable procurement. So I'll just add in kind of CCSP's bit to that. Sustainable procurement really is purchasing goods and services by incorporating more sustainable criteria alongside the traditional factors that you would consider like price and quality to overall gain best value for your organization and for the community. And so when we look at sustainable procurement, we look at 4 pillars. There's the green pillar, green or environmental procurement, covering off, energy, climate, waste, circularity, pollution prevention, things like that. The social pillar gets into supplier diversity, local procurement, equity, diversity, and inclusion, supporting equity deserving populations in your community. The ethical pillar then is looking at kind of fair labor and rights practices in the supply chain. And so that often goes a bit deeper into the supply chain and making sure your suppliers are doing no harm in terms of human rights and fair labor practices. And lastly, we do have Indigenous as sort of its own separate pillar. It's really similar to the social pillar, and a lot of organizations include Indigenous as kind of one of the equity deserving groups within social. But there are a lot of unique practices involved with engaging with Indigenous nations. And so, we have pulled it out into its own pillar. And so what's really involved in that is either purchasing directly from Indigenous businesses or creating opportunities within your contracting to subcontract with Indigenous businesses or create employment opportunities if you're doing a service contract and asking your suppliers to create those opportunities. So I won't spend too much time on all of this as I do want to get through the trends and success stories. But last thing I think I'll touch on is actually the program framework that the CCSP uses. And this is also delved into a little bit more in the report if you want more information. But essentially it means that, sustainable procurement is more than just having a policy in place and then magically more sustainable purchases will happen. It's really, to have a best practice program, you need all of these 10 elements in place from the more kind of technical elements we call, the SMART. So, strategy and action plan, procedures, tools, metrics and reporting. And then also on the heart side of the program, so we've got heart and SMART. You want to build buy-in and goodwill with your staff and your suppliers in terms of training and communications. That was spoken a lot about education and awareness in the previous presentation, as well as engaging with your suppliers. So I won't go through all 10 of these elements right now, but I will just look at the bottom row. There is an acronym there that I'll state for you. It's the HIPPO list. And so that stands for high impact procurement opportunities. That's something we like to do with members or with clients in that, in the first year or so of sustainable procurement programming, identify the top 5 to 10 procurement categories that have a high potential for sustainability intervention. So maybe there's high risks or there's high opportunities. Maybe it's really visible to your community. Maybe it's, where your strategic vendors are or where your high spend is. Just putting together a high impact procurement opportunities list. So then you can start piloting procurement sustainability with those. So won't spend too much time on this framework. If you want to learn more about it, definitely please reach out. Okay, so some trends. So in our report, we usually highlight about 10 trends each year. I'm just going to pull out 5 for this purpose of this presentation. So the first one is circularity and reuse. So circularity, it has become more of a household name in recent years, and procurement plays, a really important role in the transition from a linear to a more circular economy. And so circular principles can not only be applied to reducing waste, of course, but they also help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions, can mitigate risks to biodiversity and lessen pollution through, the recirculation of materials and using less materials and consuming less. So this not only refers to, keeping existing goods in circulation, but also using procurement criteria to ask for more recycled content in our products, ask if suppliers will take back items for refurbishment, and promoting other circular business models like product as a service instead of ownership. And so, more public sector organizations, I think, are also beginning to discover some benefits at the kind of convergence of circular economy and also cost savings initiatives. And so this is where, reuse comes in. In the last couple of years, there's been increasing efforts being put towards putting in meaningful kind of platforms and initiatives that enable reuse within an organization on a more ongoing basis. We always like to say the greenest purchase, of course, is the one that we never make. And so reusing items to keep them within circulation is a great strategy to avoid consumption, but also avoid spending money on new items. And so an example of this is, Thompson Rivers University. It's a university out in BC in Kamloops. They have their TRU reuse platform to reallocate surplus products like office equipment within the university. And so they started that in 2018. And by 2022, they actually celebrated a milestone of surpassing $500,000 in cost savings from using that platform. And so, other universities like UBC and SFU are also exploring similar platforms. Right. So, this group, we all know that climate change is an urgent issue facing us. So, one area of high impact is capital infrastructure development. About 13% of global annual emissions actually comes from embodied or embedded carbon within materials like cement and steel and aluminum, which are kind of the most popular materials right now in construction. In Canada, from the public sector alone, is responsible for releasing about 8 million tons of greenhouse gases annually that are associated with those construction materials. And so we're seeing a lot of action to help reduce the emissions that are associated with construction. Just to name kind of a couple projects from the CCSP members that we've seen, the federal government has released a new standard on embodied carbon in construction, which sets minimum requirements for the procurement of design and construction services for suppliers to disclose their carbon and to reduce the embodied footprint of major construction projects. The District of Saanich is designing a new fire hall to meet LEED Platinum standards with a net zero construction target. The City of Brampton recently completed a procurement that will be retrofitting one of their major recreation centers, become their city's first zero carbon facility. And also currently the City of Charlottetown has just started construction on a City Works building that has also been specified to meet net zero targets. So, we're just really seeing that low carbon and even net zero carbon building are gaining increasingly kind of more share of the market, especially on new builds and even in retrofits as well. Okay, so moving kind of into the social pillar a little bit, social procurement, and particularly supplier diversity and JEDI, which covers justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion considerations, has been really steadily on the rise in the last couple of years, even coming up to par with kind of the longer standing environmentally preferable procurement pillar. And so, back in, I would say 2021 or even 2020, we saw trends around organizations kind of discovering social procurement and defining their commitments to social procurement. And so this year or last year in 2022, we saw a lot of procurement folks kind of building on those commitments by actually implementing tools that will help them connect directly with social value suppliers. Social value suppliers being, certified diverse, or maybe they're B Corp certified, or they're Indigenous owned, or kind of owned by another equity deserving group as well. Particularly a lot of organizations have been using third-party supplier directories or even building their own internally to help facilitate this quick access to, a complete list of social value suppliers. So for example, York University has set up actually a public-facing directory of local social value vendors. The City of Edmonton is currently conducting an inventory of their whole supplier base to identify who is local and who is a social value supplier within their procurement system. And the University of Toronto has been doing a lot of great work in this space recently, and they've also implemented their own diverse supplier portal, I believe in collaboration with was either Tealbook or B2G Now as a platform. And so, there are some notable platforms that we're seeing used. I've listed them here on the slide. And so some of them are kind of, a platform itself, like Tealbook or B2G Now or supplier.io, or they're the diverse supplier councils that exist. So the Canadian Aboriginal and Minority Supplier Council, as well as the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business, and a couple others that are listed there as well. Okay, Indigenous procurement. So, a lot of public organizations are definitely increasingly looking at their procurement activities to how they can advance reconciliation with Indigenous peoples and actively support the economic vibrancy of Indigenous folks. So, this could include adopting policies and practices that promote purchasing directly from them, or, employing and training Indigenous peoples, or otherwise engaging them in public spending through a variety of tactics. And so CCAB, the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business, found that Indigenous businesses currently actually have the capacity to potentially supply about 24% of the goods and services that's purchased by the federal government annually. So, any organization can kind of scale that and think, what is a percentage of spend that could likely go to local Indigenous businesses? One of the most notable moves towards this recently was actually from the federal government, new procurement strategy for Indigenous business, which sets a government-wide mandatory target that at least 5% of federal spend must go towards Indigenous businesses. And so this can include, mandatory set-asides, opportunities for Indigenous subcontractors, and as well as some more training for federal procurement community. So all of that, other public sector organizations can implement in their own as well. Likewise, we've seen a lot of the CCSP members themselves advancing Indigenous procurement efforts. This could include setting up an advisory committee with local Indigenous peoples to help inform the development of an Indigenous procurement policy, or committing to including, more Indigenous considerations in certain product categories like, food services or security services, establishing spend targets that align with the federal 5%, or using other methods like bid value reductions to support the ranking of Indigenous bids against non-Indigenous bids in product categories that are deemed relevant. So, lots of interesting stuff happening in this space for sure. The last or fifth trend that I'll just highlight from the report, it's kind of stepping away from kind of the pillars and looking at a particular product category. So, one purchasing category that we've noticed getting a lot more attention this year or last year was services, or, more specifically, professional services. So these are things like financial and legal services, training providers, consultants, marketing services, and things like that. And so, a lot of the times it might be more tangible to think about sustainability of like a physical product as compared to, a service. But there are still, significant social, Indigenous, and even environmental opportunities that can be found. And so, you can definitely ask your service providers if they have diverse hiring practices, or if they have a corporate sustainability strategy, or, even if they do their own sustainable procurement, do their laptops have EPEAT certification, things like that. And so, one example is that Simon Fraser University has been working on putting together like a pre-qualified list of consultants for organizational development and leadership. And they're using a really heavy weighting on JEDI, that justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion criteria. Another move towards this in the marketplace is actually an upcoming new certification put on by NSF. So it's the 391.1 General Sustainability Assessment for Professional Service Providers. And so NSF, they're an international nonprofit organization that has a lot of leading sustainability standards. And so this one focuses on environmental impact, economic and corporate governance, social equity, as well as supply chain diversity and sustainability. And so once this is published, probably later this year, This will be a new kind of third-party certification that buyers can ask for and to look for that their suppliers kind of verify and have met certain sustainability standards. It might need some time for suppliers to get signed up for it, but definitely something to look for in the market along with other eco labels. Okay, so that was a really, really quick kind of whirlwind through 5 trends that are in the report. There are more trends. Definitely take a look at the report if you want to learn more. But now I'm going to dive into 5 of the case studies that we have from our members that highlight kind of procurements of different sizes as well as within the different pillars. Okay, so something that the city of Ottawa did a couple of years ago was they updated their procurement bylaw to enable sole sourcing to social enterprises that are owned by nonprofits and charities. So this was the kind of first step that made this whole case study possible. So last year, the city's IT department, they reached out to the procurement team because they wanted to explore how the city's end-of-life laptops could be disposed of in a way that actually benefited the Ottawa community. So, rather than disposing of the hardware using traditional e-waste services, the city took the opportunity to partner with community groups, give a new life to their IT equipment, and improve digital access for residents. And so they were able to sole source with the Planning Council of Ottawa, or SPC, which is a group that actually distributes laptops and computers to individuals and other community organizations in need. And so how it works is the city's IT team decommissions the laptops. They technically sell them to SPC for $1, and then SPC adds in kind of necessary like Microsoft software and distributes them into the community. So by making available the city's end-of-life hardware, this partnership is really addressing a genuine need in the community in terms of breaking down the digital divide, working to counter social isolation, as well as making different, digital city services available to the folks receiving those devices. And all of this while providing a second life, to reuse IT hardware and contribute to a more circular economy, that otherwise would have just maybe gone to some e-waste recycling. And so moving forward, the city is hoping that this could be a quarterly transaction. Okay, so yeah, one of the trends that I didn't mention earlier was actually the electrification of fleet that we're seeing. And it was great to see that CAP is going to be doing an event on fleet electrification. And so, City of Winnipeg has been doing some of this last year. They have a plan in place to transition to a zero emissions fleet by 2050. And zero emissions transit buses are definitely a key part of this. So, last year, the city invested a lot of money to purchase 166 vehicles for the fleet. And to make this possible, they received funding from Infrastructure Canada program. And the tender itself included, a few different vehicle models. And so that, was a complex process, but ultimately the switch to zero emissions vehicles is projected to eliminate, over 24,000 tons of greenhouse gases and improve air quality over the lifetime of the project. Another success story, over the last few years, City of Saskatoon has been honoring Indigenous heritage by unveiling bus shelters and bike racks that feature Indigenous artwork that honor Indigenous histories. So all contracts have been sole sourced each year with a different community group and engaging a local Indigenous artist to create meaningful designs and symbols that respect Indigenous histories, such as the survivors and stories of the residential school system. And so, this has been a collaboration between Saskatoon Transit and the city's Indigenous Initiatives Group. And this really, just goes to show that sometimes even if a project is small, it can have a lasting impact within the community and provide an avenue to build relationships, through artwork between city and Indigenous peoples who can now see that their story is represented within the community. So just 2 more stories quickly before I wrap up. City of Nanaimo, they had some lighting in the 3 of their recreation facilities that was reaching the end of their life and really required an upgrade to modern LED fixtures. But they were concerned about the waste that could be created from the decommissioning of the old lights and installation of the new ones. So they decided to publish a tender that contained mandatory sustainability criteria to reduce waste sent to landfill. This ultimately included that contractors must be responsible for the proper separation and recycling of old lighting and fixtures and provide proof that proper channels were used. And then for the new installation, they required that no foam or excessive packaging were used, and they preferred packaging that either had recycled content or were made from wood and paper to avoid plastic. And the city was really pleased with the receival or the response to the bid. They got a clear indication from the market that suppliers are really ready to address these kind of criteria. And last but not least, a quick social case study. So Halifax Regional Municipality recently developed a social value questionnaire that has 5 questions in it around inclusive employment opportunities, work experience programs, and diverse supply chains. And so they have to include this in any procurement that's above 125 million or $1.25 million. So an example of this was a tender they had for waste collection services. And interestingly, they found that this questionnaire did make a difference. The lowest cost vendor scored poorly on the questionnaire. So they actually ended up rewarding it to another vendor called Regroup, which got a 10 out of 10 on the social value questionnaire. So I know we're running short on time. I kind of breezed through those success stories. That's it for now. If you want to learn more about the CCSP or read the report, please reach out.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for your presentation. Sorry to put you with a short time, but both presentations were great. Thank you very much for your input. I will jump. We have in the last minutes. I will jump to questions, and thanks to the Western team, they were answering some of the questions by typing. But here is one that I think both the team from Western and you, Amanda, can elaborate a bit, which is, have any of the municipalities conducted a post-implementation analysis that looked at cost impact versus their current state before making sustainability changes? I believe, like, who wants to jump first?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm struggling to think of a specific example. I think maybe the most direct examples I can think of were, last year, a couple of years ago, City of Ottawa did a cost benefit analysis on electric boilers, changing from more traditional gas-powered boilers to fully electric in some of their recreation facilities. The cost analysis was done before the purchase as opposed to the post analysis, but maybe that's one example where there was cost savings over the lifetime of a product.
Right. Is anyone from Team Western want to jump on that?
Yeah, I actually used some of CCSP's resources in the research that we were doing for our project, and that example that Amanda just shared was one that came to top of mind for me as well. I think because green procurement is such a vast thing, doing these cost benefit analyses afterwards can be challenging at times, but I think that Amanda highlighted a great example.
Thank you. I'm gonna use the time for one more question. So the person is talking about that they ordered sugarcane, sugar sheet paper, but she's asking if there was a conversation that happened that to deliver this sugar sheet paper, it's from Colombia. So how would you rate the sugar paper on their emissions on the delivery? And have you heard that some municipalities is using this product?
Yeah, definitely getting into kind of the technical, comparison of a life cycle analysis of one to the other and getting in that delivery. So that's interesting. I do know that an organization called BC Net, which is a group purchasing organization for universities in British Columbia, has done a purchase of sugar sheet paper, and do kind of consider it a success story for them. I don't know if they considered emissions in delivery or not. That's about as far as I know about sugar sheet paper. I know that it is a great alternative to regular paper in terms of, cutting down trees. If you're getting paper there is emissions that can be associated with deforestation, right? So, if you want to get really deep into the supply chain and comparing, the emissions from delivery from across the world to deforestation and local deliveries, it can get pretty technical and pretty tricky. I think, as long as you're making some decisions to focus on some environmental issues, it's probably going to be an improvement. If there was an LCA study that came out saying sugar sheet was worse than regular paper, I'd believe it. But as far as I know, it's still a pretty good alternative.
Right. Would like recycled paper in like, because I believe if it's recycled paper and then made in Canada, is that happening?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of recycled paper out on the market. In terms of if it's being processed and developed within Canada, I'm not so sure. Yeah, we'd have to maybe go ask Staples where they source their recycled paper from. Maybe it's also coming from across the world. Not sure.
Right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. I see that we are just on time. I would just answer the next question, which is for our thinking about the database. Yes, we are thinking to maintain and update it locally, like Clean Air Partnership will do this for sure for the next 1 year, and then we'll evaluate again if this was a useful tool and if we are receiving new information, and we'll be kind of promoting it because it's just this is the launch of the database. So we'll be having a couple more webinars where we can plug this database so people know where to access and to use it because it's free and it's a very yeah, I hope it's useful because Team Western put a lot of effort there. I thank you very much. We're receiving congrats for the presentation and for the webinar. I mentioned it. We will be sharing the presentations and recording probably next week. I would like to conclude on time so we don't keep anyone more. I want to thank the Team Western for your great work. Thank you, Amanda, for jumping in and providing the CCSP updates. Great information, great report. We shared the link and the link will be shared also together with all the proceedings. And with that, I want to conclude this webinar and wish everyone a great day.
Thank you so much.